And I think that's all for me. So our host today, for those of you who don't know, is Joyce. She runs a food blog called The Joyce of Cooking, and she's a very seasoned veteran of the food and beverage industry. So I will pass it over to Joyce now.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Joyce from Joyce of Cooking. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. So when you guys asked me to do this Cooking for Climate, it's very exciting for me because I love to reduce waste in the kitchen. My husband likes to say I'm a bit of a food hoarder because I'm like, don't throw that away. I can still use it. I really like to freeze stuff to kind of make things last longer. Like for me, I think everyone can kind of learn tips and tricks in the kitchen to kind of extend the life of their food, can use it to maximize the usage of it. And also, like, while you're at it, you might as well have some fun, learn some new recipes this way. So today we're going to be making pad thai. So the theme is, cleaning out your fridge and kind of using everything that's in it. So in the recipe that was sent out, there was a bunch of ingredients, but you can be creative. So if you go into your fridge and you see that you have some vegetables leftovers, you can go ahead and use it. There's no real rules. In terms of pad thai, I would say the most important part is the sauce. So if you nail the sauce, you can really use any kind of vegetables. In the recipe, we said turkey, but today I'm going to just show a vegetarian version. So if you don't eat meat, you can definitely stick with just tons of vegetables. If you do eat meat, you can do any kind of protein from fish, turkey, chicken, beef, really whatever you like. And obviously a really popular one is with seafood, so with shrimp. But also if you are vegetarian, you can do tofu, tempeh, and kind of be really creative. You can even mix and match stuff as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just soak our noodles. So these are rice noodles, which you can easily get from any grocery store. Asian grocery store for sure. There's probably going to be more different varieties. So like these are kind of medium to thinner version. There's like some that are really, really thick and some that are like really fine. So generally speaking, for pad thai, you want the sauce to stick to the noodles. So you don't want it to be too thin. It's kind of like when you're cooking pasta, like, you want a linguine Alfredo sauce to stick to the linguine. So you kind of get the linguine size. So exact same idea. We got this one, which is rice stick vermicelli. And you can honestly get it at any grocery store now, which is nice. So we're going to just open this guy up, and you don't even need to boil it in water. You can put it in a tub of a bowl of hot to warm kind of bath temperature water. So if you dip your finger into it and you think it's a nice bath temperature, then it is good for the noodles. I'm just going to do half a package today. So when it comes out, it kind of comes out generally in like 2 blocks, one on the top and one on the bottom. So you can just take the top one and just soak it in. So you want to put it in a bowl, obviously, that's big enough that it will eventually kind of sink in. So we do this as the first step because it does take a little bit of time for it to kind of soften up. But you want it, when you cook pad thai noodles, you can boil it, but generally what happens is when you boil it, it cooks a little too fast and then it becomes sticky and the texture I just find is not so great. So the best thing to do is to soak it in the beginning. Try to cover it up with some water. And then afterwards, when we cook the sauce and all of the other ingredients, you cook it again in the pan anyways. So it kind of continues to cook the process. So I'm just going to add a little bit more water on top to top it up fully. And if you are really stuck and you don't have rice noodles, you can definitely still use like pasta noodles. Any kind of neutral tasting noodles is totally fine to use. So just put it in as much as possible so everything is covered. And then we're going to just let this sit here and chill for about 15 minutes or so. So the next step is we're going to be making the sauce. So sauce wise to me is the most important part of a pad thai dish. When you go to a lot of Thai restaurants, you get that really red pink color. So likely that is food coloring that they're adding in, or they're putting a lot of ketchup into it, which is not really in pad thai. So when you cook this version, you'll find that the color is more of like a brownish color versus a really bright red color. So, but it will taste a lot better. It's not as sweet, and the flavors are more authentic that way. So I know tamarind paste, it's probably a harder ingredient to find, but most Asian grocery store has tamarind. You can buy tamarind, it's like a pod, and you can actually use that. It's like a fruit, so you can peel it, use the inside of the fruit. But in the recipe, I said to try to get tamarind paste with no seeds in it, because it's very painful to try to squeeze out all the seeds to just use the paste. But now you can buy them in jars like this. There's even like, this is a tamarind soup base, so if you're kind of stuck, you can definitely use stuff like this too. The tamarind pod actually looks like this. There's a picture of it on the package over here. And so yeah, so like if you have tamarind, you can actually put it in the freezer. It lasts like forever. So even though, like, you know, we love eating pad thai, this is not something that we eat every single day. So if you have a lot of the tamarind paste left over, you can store it in the freezer for sure. So for sauce wise, we're gonna do tamarind. We're gonna use fish sauce, a little bit of garlic powder, sugar and salt. And then in here, we have just some water. So we're gonna put this and bring it to a boil. So we have water in here, some sugar and salt. We'll just dissolve that into the pot. A little bit of garlic powder. And I like to use garlic powder in the sauce because that is a nice smooth sauce. When we actually cook the vegetables, we're gonna be using real garlic there. If you are a vegetarian and don't want to use fish sauce, you can just use soy sauce instead. The idea of a pad thai sauce is that you get some sweet, you get some sour. So tamarind, it's a little bit sour. Sugar, obviously, there's sweetness in there. So we'll put a couple of tablespoons in here. So when I used to work in restaurants, I saw a lot of food waste, which is one of the reasons why I guess I'm very observant of when things get wasted. But like in a restaurant setting, like every single night, there's like tons and tons of garbage that gets thrown out. And it's not garbage, it's like good food that gets thrown out, which is really sad to see, especially with so many hungry people, you know, in the city. But that's the reality of it. A lot of places nowadays are trying to, you know, donate their leftover food. But the thing is, if you serve it to a customer and they don't eat it or they don't finish it, you can't really, you know, reuse that food in any way. So there's definitely a lot of waste that way. But, you know, different restaurants are doing different things now to kind of try to reduce it, which is nice to see. Like the trend is definitely there. So we're going to let this sauce go for a little bit. I'm just going to turn it down so it doesn't boil, but it's already bubbling. So you want this sauce to kind of thicken up a little bit. It won't take long because there's not that much liquid in here. And then once it kind of boils a little bit and thickens a little bit, we can just turn it off and set it aside, and we'll cook the rest of the ingredients. So just going to add a little bit more of this paste here. So we'll just let this guy go. And we'll just set him aside for now. And we'll talk about vegetables. So like I was saying, it's really great to use up everything in your fridge. So we have, I'm just going to move this out of the way. We have today everything that I have in the fridge. So we have some carrots, baby carrots, red pepper, ginger, garlic. Ginger and garlic, it's like staple in an Asian household, I would say. So we always have this, but I'll tell you a really good trick here as well. We have some hot peppers as well. This is going to be for garnish, so we'll save that for later. We have a zucchini and a green onion, and also a regular onion. So with reducing waste, number one for carrots, I would say, is if you have like a regular carrot, you actually don't need to peel the peels it's perfectly fine to eat. Just give it a wash. You can chop it up and eat it this way. If you are not a fan of seeing like all of the nicks on the skin, of course, you can go ahead and peel it. And then you can save the peels. I usually have like a little bowl with all of my vegetable scrap, and you can actually save all of the peel, put it into a freezer bag, and mix stock. So this is gonna be my mixed stock bowl with all of our scraps that we're gonna have today. So let's get chopping. So we're gonna use some ginger and garlic first. So even like the garlic peel, you can save it. If you have a compost bin, obviously you can put it in your compost bin as well. In the garden, as we're starting to grow food in our garden for, the upcoming spring season, you can definitely crush all this up into your soil as well. And then just easy way to kind of cut your garlic is to just give it a good smash, and then the skin comes off really easily. And this piece of garlic actually started sprouting. So if you wanted to, you can actually put this into the garden and grow more garlic. But even though it's sprouting, it's not the end of the world. You can definitely still eat it. I just chop off the ends, and then you can chop it all up and still eat it all here. And then we have our pan over here that we're gonna cook all of the vegetables. If you're using meat, you can go ahead and cook whatever protein you have now so that it's fully cooked, because everything comes together really quickly. So when any kind of Asian food, generally it's high heat in a wok or a pan that really conducts heat really well. So we usually cook with gas as well. So everything cooks super quickly. So you kind of want to have all of your ingredients ready to go. And then with ginger, this is one of my favorite tricks for ginger. Instead of using a peeler, because sometimes it has like all of this like knobs and bits on it, it's not smooth like a carrot to peel. The easiest way is to use a spoon. So if you use a spoon, you can actually see that the peel, like really very little flesh. So, you're not wasting a lot of ginger, and you're only getting the skin part of it. And you can, again, save this for your stock or make ginger tea with this as well. If you do make ginger tea with it, I would just recommend you like scrub the ginger first before you peel it. So then that way you're getting the clean peel in your tea. And I don't normally chop the ginger into pieces, because I find that, like, you see how all the stringy bits are at the end over here. So I like to grate it in, which I'll show you afterwards. But when you grate it in, it gives you a really nice consistency. It kind of melts. You don't get those big chunks of ginger in whatever dish you're making. And it kind of just melts into the flavor, which is really nice. And then we have our green onion and regular onion. So same thing, just roughly chop it. If you don't have one or the other, it really doesn't matter. If you have a white onion instead, if you have shallots, you can use whatever onions you have. So we're gonna get that aside. And then for peppers wise, I have red pepper, but you can use green pepper, yellow pepper, orange pepper, whatever you have. Red pepper is generally the sweetest, and it's actually just a ripened green pepper. So when you grow it, eventually your green pepper will turn red as it gets ripened. So I like using the red pepper in pad thai because it kind of ties in that sweet flavor and the sourness, so it's nice that way. And when you make any kind of dish, your little bowl of food scraps might not be enough with one dish to kind of make stock. So you can put it into a Ziploc bag and just freeze it until you're ready to make it. So then that way you have like a big bowl of veggies ready to go. And then when it's time to actually make the stock, it's all ready for you. You can just dump it into a pot.
And next week, if anyone's coming next week, Alex is actually building on that, and she's going to make a carrot soup using the vegetable stock.
Yep. And then, so if you're not a fan of spicy, you don't have to use red pepper, like chili peppers. But if you like spice, you can definitely use it. You can cut it open and scrape out the seeds if you wanted to. Where it's spicy is like the membrane. So if you are, just want a little bit of heat and you don't want to go crazy, you can just do a little bit, but it gives it a nice kick to it, which is good. And then we have our regular pepper. So regular peppers, I like to cut it and save the seeds for growing more peppers. So like when you cut it, you see that there's these lovely seeds that come out, and obviously there's a ton of seeds in each pepper. And I just started my veggie garden propagation, and we have an example over here of our pepper seed. So I saved pepper seeds from last year at some point, and I just started them in soil a couple weeks, probably a week ago, and already we have a beautiful plant growing, and hopefully we'll get some good peppers this year. But you can definitely save all of that stuff in a bowl. You can dry it, just kind of put it on a piece of paper towel, dry it, and you can save it because you might not use even like all of the seeds in one pepper. So you can definitely save it for next year as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the pan going here. So I generally like to use cast iron pans, and that's because you're reducing a lot of waste in the long run. When you use cast iron versus like a non-stick pan, you have to replace that non-stick pan probably every once in a while because you're cooking in it, and eventually the non-stick coating comes off of it, which probably is not good to consume. But in terms of just like not wasting stuff, it's really important for me to kind of use this cast iron, and now you can use it forever. Like you season it, you maintain it, you make sure that it's happy, and you can honestly use this pan forever. So think about like just the money that you're saving in general, but it's great to be able to kind of think, I'm going to keep this pan for as long as possible, and I don't have to buy and add more stuff to my home. So pan is getting hot. We are going to start with the ginger and the garlic. Oh, and I guess I'm not going to use the zucchini today, but I can show you what I would normally do. So I would just chop off the ends over here. I would roughly peel it. You don't have to peel it fully, but again, you can save all of this stuff. And then what you can actually do is you can slice it thinly like this so that everything cooks together really quickly. And you can actually do this with the carrots as well, but you're making like really thin kind of noodles on its own, but it's veggies. And then same thing with the carrots. If you wanted to do with the carrots, you can just kind of peel it into thin ribbons. So when you cook, it cooks super quickly. And there's no like, oh, the carrot is really crunchy still. Everything is kind of nice and soft that way. Okay, so this guy is hot. We're gonna add some oil. So generally with Asian cooking, you wanna use a oil that's not gonna smoke too much, so it has a high smoke point. So meaning like no, you can do avocado oil, you can do regular canola oil, vegetable oil, but generally no olive oil, because olive oil, it will smoke too much. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna add our garlic, our onions, and also our ginger to the mixture first. And we'll want to just get some of this flavor going. And then with the ginger, like I was saying before, I just take a grater like this. If you don't have a grater like this, you can definitely use like a cheese grater and just use the finest edge to grate it in. So when you grate it in, what happens is that you're not getting the stringy bit. All the stringy bit gets left behind, but you're getting all the good stuff. All the good stuff comes off to the back over here. And when you cook it afterwards, you don't even see it anymore. It kind of just melts all into all of your other ingredients. So no one's gonna get a big chunk of ginger, which is nice. So we're gonna just mix this guy around. So Helena, you had some questions, right?
Yes, I did. And you answered most of them, to be honest, but
Okay.
I would like to say that I'm just realizing now what I thought was technology is obviously a very competent camera person.
Yes, that's my husband behind the camera.
Oh, you were
It's
controlling it. Okay. Well, yeah, you talked about what makes your demo climate friendly, and I won't assume, but when and why was one of my questions. Did you start to pay attention to food waste and its role in climate action?
Yeah, so I think like for me, it's just trying to like not waste so much money at the grocery store and kind of maximizing your dollar and stretching it out. Like I've been probably doing this since I was in university, where when you don't have a big paycheck in school and you're trying to stretch out your dollar and making sure that you still have a decent meal. So I think in university was probably the first time that I'm like, oh, I don't have a lot of money and I don't want to eat, garbage every single day. So how am I going to do that? So I want to stretch it out as much as possible, learn to cook different meals that I can kind of freeze and eat at other times. So like I was very lucky in the sense that like I went to Guelph University, so I had fantastic roommates. We all like to eat and cook, so we kind of use that love to cook in the kitchen to kind of share different recipes and stuff. So I think that's really how I started to really kind of focus on, really it was to save money at first. But then whenever I go to the grocery store, sometimes like for me, I can't help but notice how other people are shopping. And sometimes it kind of like hurts me a little bit because I'm like, oh, if you bought, like, I don't say this to people because they don't know who I am and they'll probably think I'm crazy. But in my mind, I'm like, oh, if they bought this instead of this, like if they wanted to make, this packaged good item that they're buying, they can probably save so much more money. It's better for them if they were able to just buy these 3 ingredients instead, right? So I think teaching people how to cook and like the whys is super important. So like that's why I'm doing these things, because I really want to make sure that people understand that it's not that hard to make a delicious meal, but you can at the end of the day save so much money and still get a really nutritious meal too.
Yeah. And do I have time for another one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I think one of the big barriers to cooking for yourself is, like you said, not really being able to visualize what you can make with like the random assortment of things that you have in your fridge or your kitchen. So do you have any other tips that you maybe haven't talked about yet about how you can start overcoming this?
I think it's to just experiment and try it out. Generally speaking, when you're making like Asian food specifically, like I don't really think you can kind of mess that up as long as you have the base. So the base of this is sauce, right? So if you nail the sauce, you can use any kind of noodles, you can use any kind of vegetables. So to me, I think if you nail one aspect, the most important aspect of the dish, then you can kind of reduce your waste that way by going, you know what, I don't have rice noodles, or I have only really thick rice noodles. Maybe I'll use this still and chop it up. Or I have an assortment of other vegetables that are normally not in a pad thai, but I'm still able to use it. So I think that's really important. Experimenting is probably the easiest way to kind of try it out. Just not like when I think about people cooking, like following a recipe is great, but you really start to learn how to cook and how ingredients work together once you kind of try different things. Like normally you would not see a zucchini in a pad thai, but if we put it in, it's not the end of the world. It still tastes great because the base of it is the sauce. So being just kind of a little bit out of your comfort zone, trying different stuff, I think that's the key to kind of, using up everything in your fridge and your pantry.
And I've got a couple of questions from the chat.
Yeah.
So we've got, what is the burner you're using and where did you get it?
The burner that we're using is a portable gas burner that uses these little canister
like the butane cans?
Yeah, butane gas. So these you can get from Asian grocery stores. So this is usually what people use for hot pot in Asian cooking. So if you guys know what hot pot is, it's pretty much, we usually make like a big pot of soup, and then we have meats and veggies, and we all sit at a table and we just like cook the meat and veggies in the hot pot. And since you're not doing this in the kitchen, you use one of these gas stove, portable gas stove. Where do we get this? Amazon? I think it was Amazon. You can definitely get it at Amazon. You can also get it at places like T&T, Asian grocery stores pretty much will have it. But it's very easy to use, very easy to clean. You just have to, this little component over here, when it's off, you can flip it open and you put one of those butane canister in, and then you just turn it on and there's gas. So great for like camping or like in case of emergency too, like if you have a power outage, this is a great way to still be able to cook a nice meal.
Thank you. And someone is saying, who's yay cooking along, my sauce is very liquidy right now. Is that normal?
Yeah, so you can keep the sauce on your stove and let it cook down a little bit further. So you want to kind of reduce as much of the water as possible, but also keep in mind that you don't want it to be too thick, because we're still going to introduce it back into the pan. And you have to think about how it's going to coat all your noodles as well. So it might seem a little bit more liquidy than normal, like than your final product. But once we kind of coat it with the veggies and with the noodles, it will coat it nicely. But you can definitely keep it on the stovetop for a little bit longer to reduce it.
Yeah, anybody who joined late, there was a couple people who I think joined after this time. The noodles are soaking in a bowl in warm water and not being boiled. I do have a personal question.
Yeah, go for it.
And I was just wondering, because I am new to saving scraps for stock myself, are there any vegetables you want to avoid putting in there?
Me personally, I would say no. I know there are certain things that people don't like to put in, like people might not put in like potato skins or stuff like that. But I think, again, is to try it out and see how it tastes. I think your vegetable stock is going to be a little bit different every single time too, because every single time you might be cooking with different vegetables. So experiment with it. The color might come out differently too. But for me, I put everything in there. I don't really eliminate anything.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no worries. So in the pan here, while we were talking, I added the red peppers, the zucchini and the carrots in here as well. So everything is kind of cooked. If you're cooking along, you can probably smell how like the ginger and the garlic and all that deliciousness is coming together. The red onion is soft and starting to caramelize as well. So everything is coming together very nicely over here. And then the next step is really to just combine everything together. So I'm going to cook 2 eggs as well. So you can do this the lazy way, which is the way I'll show you now, or you can scoop everything out and just cook the eggs in the pan. But this is one less thing to clean up. And especially if you're making this during a weekday, less cleanup, the better. So what I did was I moved everything off to the side. So if you had like meat in here that's fully cooked, veggies in here, you're going to move everything off to one side. And then you have a nice little cooking surface over here. We're going to put some additional oil so it doesn't stick as much. And then you're going to take 2 eggs. If you do not eat eggs, you can do the vegan eggs. Like there's a brand called Just Eggs, which is kind of like vegan scrambled eggs. You can do that instead, or you can omit this altogether. So we're going to just put in our 2 eggs. And then with the eggshells, I'm going to start saving eggshells again for tomato plants. So I usually crush them, wash them, crush them, dry them and put it into my tomato plants. So we're going to just scramble this guy in here and just let it cook a little bit. So especially if you're not putting meat into this pad thai, the eggs adds a little additional protein, which is great. Makes you fuller, gives you more nutrients that way. And then you can add a little bit of salt and pepper to the eggs at this point. So for Asian cooking, I usually use white pepper. which is just a different peppercorn than black pepper. But if you don't have white pepper, black pepper is totally fine. Taste is different for sure, but you can probably get white pepper, I think, from most grocery stores now anyway, so it's not really that hard to find. And then if you guys follow me, I'm a huge fan of MSG. So MSG is an additive that you can add into Asian cooking or any cooking really, if you mix soups, stews, anything like that. But it enhances the flavors of whatever you're making. It creates that umami flavor. And there's a lot of debate about whether or not MSG is safe to use, is it safe to eat, but it's totally safe. And it's actually in everything from mushroom, Parmesan cheese, and even breast milk. And it's naturally occurring in those food. And that's why, you know, when we taste a beautiful spaghetti sauce, it's so satisfying. It's because there's tomatoes, there's Parmesan cheese, and all that good stuff in there. So when you use MSG, you only need very little, and it's kind of like crystally powder. And you can actually use less salt whenever you use MSG, which is nice, especially if you're on a diet that you need to reduce your sodium content. So we have our eggs pretty much fully cooked over here. And then we're gonna just chop it up so that it kind of evenly distributes throughout our noodle dish. So at this point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna combine everything together. So eggs, if you had meat in here, veggie in here, kind of stir it all up. And then what we're gonna do is we are going to add the sauce in now. So since the pan is on, when we put the sauce in here, it will continue to reduce as well. So we'll just bring the sauce in. And you want to just kind of get all of the ingredients coated in the sauce. And you can smell that tamarind, like that sour tamarind that is, you know, known for being in pad Thai. Like you can kind of smell that already. And then so if you're in a kitchen and you have a sink, you can just dump the noodles into a colander. But since I don't have a sink right here, I'll just fish out the noodles. And then I'm gonna put it into the pan. So the noodles, if there's a little bit that's a little bit hard still, it's totally fine because you are cooking it in the pan still, and it will continue to soften in the pan. So here what we're gonna do is we're gonna just mix it in. You want the sauce to continue to reduce. You'll see that it's bubbling away, like you can see the sauce bubbling on the side over here. So you want that to kind of keep going so that the noodles get coated nice and evenly. And then your noodles probably like just almost to the point where it's like the perfect eating consistency. So it will continue to cook a little bit longer so that it'll be nice and soft. So while this is happening, we will just finish up our garnish. So I'm going to turn down the heat a little bit so it doesn't burn. And then our garnish is really just peanuts. So if you have an allergy to peanuts, obviously don't put peanuts in. But you can do other nuts if you wanted to, like if you're a fan of walnuts, if you have some extra nuts left over, you can definitely do that. If you have peanuts that are not chopped up already, you can chop it up, but these are chopped up and good to go. And then we have lime. So lime you always see in pad Thai is like a garnish. And I like to just squeeze a little bit in and then have a wedge on the side. So whoever is eating it, if they prefer more lime, they can squeeze it in themselves. So always roll it out so that you get the juice kind of flowing. You see the lime was really hard before, but now you roll it out, it's much softer. And then you can cut it into pieces. I like to just do it this way, and then fork or spoon, and I just kind of sprinkle a little bit in here. And you can save the seeds for lemon, lime, all that stuff, and grow your own little lemon tree. It'll take a while for sure, but it's a fun little project to do to kind of see that grow. And then, so the lime is in here. We're gonna just give it a good mix to kind of toss everything in. So you see how all my sauce is gone. So once it was a little watery at some point, but now all my sauce is absorbed into the noodles, and the noodles now are nice and soft. It's perfect for eating, and everything is coated. So you see that it's definitely not that red ketchup-y color that you see in some restaurants, but the taste and the smell is perfect. And then here, what we will do is, so let me just plate her up.
Joyce, I have a question in the chat.
Sure.
I have seen a few recipes that use peanut butter as a substitute for tamarind paste. Is that, how would you?
So I would say no, because peanut butter is completely different than tamarind paste. Like tamarind paste has a sour taste to it, which is what you kind of want in a traditional pad thai. That flavor. If you use peanut sauce, you're making a completely different dish, which is not to say it's not good, because, you know, everybody loves peanut butter, but it's not, I wouldn't call it a pad thai. Maybe it would be more like a peanut sauce noodle instead. So I wouldn't recommend it as a substitution, but you can definitely use it for like another dish.
Okay, thank you. And just a comment from earlier, that Lori said that she would avoid beet peels in my stock because it would color everything pink.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I have a ton of beets from last week's session, so my stock is going to be pink.
Which is fine. It'll still taste great, but it will just probably look a little bit more red than usual. But I garnished it with some peanuts with the wedge of lime on the side, and then we're ready for dinner.
That looks so good. And I think I can smell it too.
Upstairs? Is someone cooking upstairs?
Someone is cooking upstairs.
So pretty much, like, the only other thing that I kind of want to go over, which are like little helpful tips to save money on grocery shopping, are 3 apps. Well, 2 apps and a website that I really like to use. So the 2 apps that I really like to use is Flip. So Flip is a grocery store. Well, no, it's not only grocery store. It's like a shopping app, I guess you can say, where you can look at different flyers and stuff. And the reason why I like using Flip is because I like to price match when I go grocery shop, and Flip just makes it easier. You don't have to kind of go through your paper flyers or anything like that. But you can easily shop way smarter by using Flip. So if you need red peppers, you type in red peppers, and it tells you, honestly, like all the grocery stores in your area that's selling red pepper, and you can go wherever you want or price match it. You can also create shopping lists, which is fantastic. They even categorize it into categories. So if you're only buying stuff in the cereal lane, it'll say cereal or produce lane. So it makes life a lot easier that way. Another app that is one of my favorite is the Flash Food app. So I talked about that the other day on my Instagram, but what Flash Food does, which is fantastic, and they've been doing it for a couple of years now, is they get food from grocery stores that are about to expire. So, and by expire, they mean like this pepper is looking a little wrinkly, so we can't really sell it to the regular consumer anymore. So instead of selling it for $2, we're going to sell it for 50 cents. So you download this app, you can search whatever store in your area or outside of the area, and you can buy stuff. So you put your credit card in and you can just go, oh, I want the pepper, I want this, and you go in, you show them the app, they confirm that it's you, and you pick up the stuff. So you can actually get meat really cheap that way. So for me, like, we usually buy meat in bulk and then we put it in the freezer because it's way cheaper that way. But when you buy meat through the Flash Food app, it's even cheaper that way. Like, you can get sausages for like $1 and you can freeze it. So as long as you have a freezer, you have access to a freezer, the food that is technically expiring can be stretched out for a lot longer that way. And what's cool about that app is that sometimes you're like, yeah, there's a produce box, I'll buy it. And then you buy the produce box and then you end up getting fun produce that you might not necessarily buy on a regular basis. So you get to try something new too, which is cool. And then the last website that I like to use is called Food Fund, which is when farmers have like a carrot. So this carrot has to look like this, in order for them to sell it at the grocery store. But when you grow your own food, you'll know that nothing ever comes out like this, like nothing. So like if you grow peppers, it's not going to look perfect all the time. So what happens to all of these produce that gets grown and they're considered, you know, ugly or not perfect? They get dumped into the garbage usually, which is so sad because it's like still perfectly good to eat, and there's people that are starving and we're just throwing this away because it doesn't look perfect. So that website works with farmers and they buy their stuff and resell it pretty much, but at a way cheaper price. So you can get like different produce boxes for a lot cheaper just because it doesn't look as pretty. But I think it's fun, right? Like when you get a pepper or like a carrot that has like two little legs sticking out, like it's fun to kind of see how things actually grow. So those are the three things that I really like to use. And if you guys know any of other good money saving shopping tips, I'd love to hear it too.
There are a couple questions. One is about the sprouts in the recipe. Are those put on top as a garnish?
So at the end of it, you can, before you garnish everything, you can mix the sprouts in. Sprouts, it's nice to keep them raw and not fully cooked because they get really mushy. So it gives it a nice little crunch at the end too.
Okay. And Ginny's asking what store does Flash, but I think it's a bunch of stores, right?
Yeah, so Flash Food, that app, within like in East Hamilton, there's definitely No Frills that uses that app. And then there's other cities that have like, you know, Superstore, No Frills, Fortinos. It's really dependent on like if the store wants to participate. But within this area, I know definitely there's a lot of food, No Frills that participate.
Okay, thanks. All right. So, I mean, is there any, is that kind of, you're wrapping up, Joyce?
Yeah, I'm good.
Demo
Yeah.
part? Okay. So I'll open up the floor if there's any questions from the group. Everyone's been pretty good at putting some stuff in the chat, but if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question or comment, now's the time. And you can just interrupt me. Perfect.
Oh, if you're and if you don't have the rice noodles and you're using pasta, do you cook the pasta like al dente, and then when you're ready to in the sauce, it'll finish cooking?
Yeah, so pretty much if you don't have the rice noodles, pasta, you will cook it almost to al dente, so maybe at like the 6-minute point, because you want to put it back into the pan with all of the other ingredients, so it'll continue to cook a little bit. If you cook it fully and then put it into the hot pan especially, it will get too mushy. So I would say like 5-6 minute mark, take it out and then finish it up in the pan.
Great, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
I was using a spaghetti squash, so I used the noodles from the spaghetti squash. But I did cook it in the oven first, so they were mostly cooked. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's a great idea to incorporate more veggies, especially if you don't eat carbs or you don't eat noodles or rice like that. It is to do spaghetti squash is a great idea. Definitely cook it in the oven first, and then when you scrape it out, it's probably still like you can cook it a little less than normal, I would say. But again, just kind of thinking about adding it into the pan. With pasta, I feel like it will get softer a lot quicker than the spaghetti squash. So I would say like cook spaghetti squash like pretty much almost to how you would normally cook it. And then you can add it in. I don't think it will get mushy or anything with the sauce and the veggies.
And if you need a little more liquid, what would you suggest? So you don't dilute.
You need a little bit more liquid. You can do any kind of stock if you have. You can just use water. If you have water, it's totally fine to just use water. Or if you want, you can mix up a little bit additional of the sauce that we made and just pour it in. But yeah, like water, it's fine. Any kind of stock you have lying around is fine. Or even like water. And then if you have like a veggie cube, like one of those bouillon cubes, you can kind of mix that in to kind of give it additional flavor. But yeah.
I have a question about the food fund one, the app.
Yeah.
Where do you pick up those ones?
So Food Fund, they actually deliver it to you. So it's, I want to say it's like about $30 for a produce box, but it's like jam packed full of stuff. You can pick and choose depending on, you know, how many people live at home, or like, you know, how much produce you want. And you can do organic or regular produce, and you can even add additional stuff to it too. Yeah, so there's a lot of really cool stuff there. And then pretty much you order it. You can do a subscription of like a weekly if you wanted to, or you can skip weeks if, you know, one box is good for a while. But yeah, they deliver it right to your door.
Wow.
Yeah, so you don't even need to go out.
That's awesome. Those are really good resources. And as usual, as with the last couple sessions and with the next one, we're going to be sending out a list of the resources that have been mentioned throughout the session to everybody who's registered after the last session, which is next Tuesday. So yeah, Ginny, I hope your pad thai bowl is jam-packed with sprouts from last week.
Sprouts from last week. Thank you, Joyce. It was
Guys,
great.
did anyone finish cooking? I would love to see your final product.
I'm getting a no shake from mine upstairs. It's not done yet.
And the thing is, it's really cool because like we kind of whipped this up within like 30 minutes, I would say 30, 40 minutes from like start to finish, right? So even though sometimes we think like, oh, pad thai, it's like, oh, a little bit intimidating to cook for a weeknight dinner, but it just kind of shows that it's really not that hard. If you have some veggies, if you have some noodles, and obviously you have to have the tamarind, but if you have the ingredients on hand, you can whip up a really nice, nutritious dinner within 30 minutes, even on a weeknight.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's important.
I think your camera person's hungry.
And also it makes a great leftover for the next day. So if you cook a lot of it today, you can put it in, you know, containers, glass containers, put it into your fridge, and it will last a good probably 2-3 days. And if you want to make it ahead, I wouldn't recommend cooking the noodles ahead of time because the rice noodles doesn't freeze very, very well. But you can kind of prep all your veggies ahead of time, put it into a Ziploc bag, put it in the freezer. So then all you have to do is soak your noodles when you're ready for dinner, make the sauce, which takes 2 seconds to make, and then your veggies, which is all pre-cut in a freezer bag, you can just throw it into the pan and it will defrost really quickly, and you can cook it all like super quick.
Great. And yeah, if there's no other questions, we have a couple thank you messages in the chat for you, Joyce.
Thank you, thank you. So if you guys have additional questions or you cook this, you know, maybe a couple of weeks later or days later, you can always reach out to me and let me know. I love to see your creation, so tag me at Joyce of Cooking. I love to see everyone's food afterwards. Makes me happy.
And I shared the recipe from your website in the chat. Someone was asking about that. So there are other recipes there as well, right?
Yeah, there's tons of other recipes that you can try out on the website as well. I do other cooking classes, obviously. So if you go online, you can see the different cooking classes I'll be doing.
Thank you very much.
No
All right.
problem.
So
thanks so much.
yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Enjoy your meal if you cooked along, or, you know, your other meals if you were just watching. Lots more thank yous rolling in. So you should read those, Joyce.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, so next week, 1 p.m., we have Alex from Kitchen Island. If you haven't tried her pastries, highly recommend. You can order them now and she'll deliver them to you, or you could pick them up on Sunday. But she's going to be making carrot soup out of veggie stock, if you have some veggies left over. And I think croutons, homemade croutons too. So don't let that stale bread go to waste either.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone.